Today, I'm going to help you understand what to know about land contracts. Usually, there are a lot of questions surrounding land contracts, and some of them can be very specific. So by the end of this video, I'm going to help you understand exactly what you need to know about land contracts that will benefit you as a real estate investor and understand which strategies that utilize land contracts that can make you a great amount of wealth when it comes to real estate investing. Did you realize that with a land contract, you can purchase a piece of property without even getting traditional financing? Or if you're a seller, that you can potentially earn even more money with land contracts than you otherwise could? Well, stay with me as I cover everything land contracts by first helping you understand exactly what a land contract is, how they work, and finally, what are the advantages and disadvantages of a land contract to both the buyer and the seller. If you're ready, let's go. So a land contract is a legal agreement for a seller finance purchase that doesn't involve traditional financing or a bank. It really is putting the buyer and seller together where they negotiate all the terms and all the conditions of this purchase on a certain piece of property. So what is the angle if you're a buyer, and why would you utilize a land contract? Well, number one, a land contract is typically utilized, especially for a buyer if they don't have the funds for a down payment, or maybe they don't have the credit history or the best type of credit to be able to get a traditional loan. You can get into a land contract if you're a buyer with no money down and even with poor credit. And if you've ever been in a situation as a buyer where maybe you've been through a short sale or a foreclosure, those type of things can damage your credit for a long period of time. So a land contract allows you to bypass the traditional financing and avoid some of the things that maybe are hanging around you because of financial situations that have impacted you in the past. So how does a land contract work? Well, because there's no bank involved, there's no fees associated with a bank like closing costs. A land contract is faster and cheaper and a better process than utilizing traditional bank. If you've ever done a loan with a bank before, you know how cumbersome it can be. And the buyer and seller actually work out all the details from the purchase price to the periodic payments to the interest rate. And traditionally, when you are doing a land contract and the seller is dealing with somebody who can't get traditional financing, that seller is going to charge a higher interest rate than traditional financing. And they should, because they're dealing with somebody who maybe has had some credit challenges in the past, and they're taking a greater risk than if they were just to sell the property outright. Now, here's where it gets interesting. In a traditional land contract, the seller retains the legal ownership of the property until that land contract is paid in full. Now, the buyer does have something called equitable title, and they want to make sure that they get that in place because that helps them to make sure that the seller doesn't resell the property to somebody else or have any liens against the property that they don't know about. Now, you might ask the question, well, what if the seller already has financing in place through traditional financing? Can he still do a land contract? Well, he absolutely can. It's called a wraparound mortgage. So if you are a seller, you can go sell your property on a land contract, receive that monthly payment and charge a little bit more because you are seller financing it. Take that payment, wrap around, pay your mortgage payment, and keep the difference. So that's called a wraparound mortgage that many people utilize when it comes to land contracts. So how does a land contract benefit you as a seller or as a real estate investor? Number one, it gives you a whole lot more flexibility. As a seller financer utilizing a land contract, you negotiate all the terms, the interest rate, the payments, if there is a balloon payment, which a balloon payment is that final payment that you say, hey, at this date, the principal balance needs to be paid. Now, typically, the payments every single month will count towards interest payments as well as principal payments, just like any mortgage, but that final payment or balloon payment that pays off the balance, it strictly pays off just the principal balance of the loan. The seller can typically charge more than a bank because they're taking that risk, but here's where it gets really interesting for the seller. If the buyer defaults on payments at all, a land contract absolutely benefits the seller because the seller can act as the landlord without any of the landlord responsibilities of maintenance, repairs. The buyer also pays the taxes and insurance, but the seller has the ability, if the buyer ever defaults, to evict them from the property as if they were a landlord and not go through the foreclosure process. So you need to understand that, right? If a buyer defaults on a land contract and you are the seller in a land contract, you could potentially evict the buyer from the property, keep all the money they paid up to that point, and you still retain ownership of the property. And say this is 5 or 10 years down the road, what is the value of the property now? You keep all those monthly payments that were ever made, and you still own an asset that's appreciated over the last 5 to 10 years. So a land contract absolutely benefits the seller in every scenario. That is why, whether you're a buyer or a seller, I always recommend getting an attorney involved that understands land contracts specific for the state. Because if you do not set it up the right way, it could be a challenge and a catastrophe for both a buyer and a seller, but specifically the buyer. And land contracts are great, and there's some strategies that specifically utilize land contracts, but I've got a strategy that I've developed that I'm utilizing right now that works in any market, any condition, and it's requiring little to no money out of my pocket. It's something I've come up with called cash flow flipping. And if you want to understand how to do this strategy to its fullest step by step, I've written a book that'll show you exactly how to do that called Cash Flow Flipping, and I'm giving it away 100% free. Just click on the link below, cashflowflipping.com, to get your copy. Thanks for stopping by.